Welcome back to the Chronicles. We started looking at chapter 15 of Revelation yesterday, and we're going to pick up the story now and finish the chapter and look at verses 5 to 8. 5 to 8. After this, I looked and I saw in heaven the temple, that is, the tabernacle of the covenant law, and it was opened. Out of the temple came the 7 angels with the 7 plagues. They were dressed in clean, shining linen and wore golden sashes around their chests. Then one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 bowls filled with the wrath of God who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power. And no one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed.
Yeah, I mean it's after this, so in one sense it's a new section, because I mean Revelation isn't chronological; it's jumping us about, hasn't it? So we've seen something of the wrath of God, and now we're sort of coming now to look again at God and His temple, and I guess this whole passage is showing us that you don't mess with God, and He's not a little God. So the one that they were singing about at the end of our last section. This is the God, isn't it? He's in his temple. It's pictures of holiness and purity, and you can't just wander into his presence because you will die, because he's holy and pure. And that's the God that we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is very different, isn't it, from a lot of people's idea of God, you know?
Yes, and people will often say, because I mean, there are some people who are very happy to say, I do not believe in God, but there are lots of people who don't want to go that far, who will say that they do believe in a God or a higher power, but that they want to be able to define him on their own terms, or really they want to look inside and think what they think is good, and then project that onto a sort of spirit form of themselves, really.
Yeah.
But I think if we're thinking sensibly, if we're going to acknowledge there's a God, well, surely he's going to be greater, more powerful than we are. And we've got to let him define himself.
Yeah.
And that's what Revelation is constantly doing. And, it's not chronological revelation. So we're not moving really in that kind of way. And there's a sense in which we are still caught up in the storm of judgment from chapter 14. And I was thinking about it like the eye of a storm, which you get in hurricanes and tornadoes, perhaps, where the storm comes and it batters the coastline, but then for a moment in the middle, there's like a sea of calm, perfect calm, and the people of God are there in this illustration. But then that moves again, and you get the back end of the storm, and that's kind of where we are here. And the temple language is being used, and it's amazing. The temple language, because when God redeemed his people from Egypt, the great promise was that he would come and dwell with them and that he would live among him. That really was the climax of the Exodus story, that God would be with his people. But you get to the end of Exodus and Moses can't go in because the glory of the Lord is there. The temple is filled with smoke. It's a holy place. This isn't just like Santa Claus has come to live with you. This is the God of the ages, the holy God, and you can't muck about. And if you do, judgment's coming.
And rightly so, because that's what idolatry is. It's making up an idea of God and not allow. I mean, we wouldn't like it, would we? If I misrepresent you and say, well, I think Tom is, and then I make up what you are.
Yeah,
it's absurd, and actually, it's what the Bible would call blasphemous, isn't it? So we have to allow him to be who he is, and he is an awesome God. Now, of course, he reveals himself as Father. He is a God of love, and of course. But we mustn't water that down to say, okay, then he doesn't really care about what I do and what I don't do. I don't think God would judge anyone. Yes, he will. And he has to, because it is who he is, the pure one. And I think that's what we're seeing.
It is. And you have this all the way throughout the Bible, that we can't, I think often we think that God, as I say, will just be a slightly better version of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that when we come to meet him, we'll just be able to casually wander into his presence. Like, hey dudes, how are you? But I mean, that is just so far from the Bible's description of meeting God. So you think about when Isaiah meets God in Isaiah chapter 6, it's this language. He sees the Lord high and exalted, seated on his throne, and the temple was filled with smoke, and the threshold, the thresholds and the pillars are shaking.
And even though he's a prophet, he sees who he is. I'm an unclean man, living in the land of unclean people and unclean lips and that sort of stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. And he knows if atonement isn't provided, he's going to be riddled with plagues.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, you have got, what you've got here is that this God has a plan. And he is waging war with impurity. He is going to cleanse, as we saw at the end of chapter 14. He's going to bring justice. He's going to bring judgment. And we have... So we're never going to find heaven on earth.
No.
Yeah, because God has got to bring... He's going to complete his work, and judgment is going to come, and heaven and the new earth is happening. Those things happen together, don't they?
Yeah.
So when people are saying, I'm trying to find heaven on earth, I'm putting all my energy in trying to make my own heaven on earth, it's a disaster, because that has got to come to an end for this God's plan to be put into action of a new heaven and a new earth. Okay, we'll finish that.